So I just want to thank all of you for going through and answering all these questions. We had our first session. This is session 2, where we're going to go through the second page of the pre-submitted questions. And now all the questions that were put through the chat that we have put onto a document that we're now going to be going through. I will say to any viewers of this, if there's still a question remaining that you don't feel has been answered, please submit them to the VNI at their website, and that website is veterinarynurse.org, and that they will return a response to you. And Ken and Heather, can we say that if you get that response, you'll get it in how 48 hours, a week? Because I know things are crazy.
I say 24 hours.
Okay. Oh, I like it better. I like it better. Okay. So with that, what I'm going to do is go and turn this over to Mark, and we do have our full group here, minusing Patty because she had to actually go back to work. So let's dive in. Mark, go for it.
Thanks, Catherine. First question. I'm Mark Cushing, for those that may be joining late, with the Animal Policy Group. How is Nafta going to reconcile with certain states that do not want to change to RVN, or Registered Veterinary Nurse? And now direct that to Ken, and if Heather or Ed would like to add to that, please do so.
The process of the National Credential Initiative, which was what it was called, initially started out with conversations with the states. And so it has a lot of feedback from the states. It also had a survey that went out to the state association's board members so that they were able to give input as well. And so we've taken in a good amount of feedback from the states themselves. Now, I do understand that there will be some state associations that aren't able to get on board at the moment, or maybe opposed to it, but hasn't, we haven't had that clear conversation yet. That's okay. We'll continue to have conversations. I think that people will see, as we move forward, the value of the Vet Nurse Initiative, and the best thing about this is that we're all talking about how to better elevate the profession regardless of the title, and that's what I really like about the Vet Nurse Initiative, is that it's put so much focus on this, that on the profession itself and the challenges, what we need to change, that everyone should be putting on that effort, and where our goals align, we'll continue moving in that direction.
Ed or Heather, anything to add?
No, for me, I think that was a great answer. And, just as much as Ken said, being able to work towards a common goal is so important. And the education and the awareness that has been created within our industry is phenomenal.
Okay. I'm going to read the next question. I will tell you in advance, I do not understand the question. So if one of you wants to interpret it, and when you answer it, you might want to clarify what you think you're answering. And I don't think I could sound more obtuse in that preface, but let me read the question. Here we go. In states that call people who are called veterinary technicians, not necessarily by a standardized route, will be called a veterinary nurse ?
So I think I can interpret that question, if that it would be helpful. They're curious if all technicians will then be called veterinary nurse. No, Katie, what am I saying?
Go ahead.
If you don't mind.
No, go for it.
Okay, so I think what they're talking about, or their question is, we do have, and I'm going to pick on California because I'm most familiar with their rules and regs. They still have an alternative route to become an RVT in the state of California. So if I interpret the question correctly, will these alternative pathways, RVTs, be granted an RN if it passes in that state?
Thank you. Who wants to answer that?
I think I can answer that. So in states that have alternate routing, or people who have grandfathered in from way long ago to having a credential in that state at the moment, if the change is implemented in that state, the people who are credentialed within that state likely will become RVNs. It's up to the state and how the state board decides to implement it, but I can't see any of the states wanting to remove more people from the pool that we have of veterinary technicians out there, or veterinary nurses when it comes to that. And it wouldn't be best for the profession either. The question comes to when we start talking about reciprocity, should these people be RVNs in other states as well? And that's where we have to start having more involved conversations about what our standards are, what the reciprocity looks like, possibly trying to come to an agreement on compact and things of that nature that will allow better reciprocity and mobility. It's only a guess that I could make is that the people who are credentialed in that state through alternate routes will remain only credentialed in that state until the standards become closer together and people come to a better agreement.
Okay, anyone else want to add to the answer? I'll go to the next.
And
Sure, I'd like to add to that as well. I'm sorry, did someone else speak?
Yeah,
Go
Kate
ahead, Ed.
wanted to jump in.
Go ahead, Ed.
Thank you. So I just wanted to kind of add to what Ken said, that of course our ultimate goal is to have that type of alternate route be something that does have an end period in states that may have something like that currently. And again, we can't mandate that, but that would, I assume, be part of the discussion that we would be having as we're moving into those states. I also think that it's important to point out that not only in our field did this happen in this way, but also if you look back in the history of human nurses, there was that time as well where we do have to have this intermediate time where not everyone might be at the exact same standard for how they got to a particular title, but then looking to the future to how that will be the standard moving forward is our long-term goal. Thank you.
Katie?
Well, to address that, to Ed, it would not be a retroactive removal of a credential that somebody has been through an alternate pathway. But I do think we need to push for reciprocity. I've got a friend who's alternate pathway. She's an RVT in California. She's a CVT in Colorado. She has a VTS, but she's not eligible to sit for the state exam in Texas because she's not a graduate of an AVMA program.
Let me move on to the next question. This one could take and by the way, Katie, that was great to amplify. Next question, and again, in the interest of time, we need to try to move as quickly as we can just because of the volume here. How are you going to enforce all of this? Question. And if it isn't enforced now, what's the new plan that will enforce all of this? Heather, do you want to jump in?
Absolutely. I think that, the state boards don't know when veterinarians or veterinary technicians or assistants are calling an uncredentialed person by a credentialed name. And they're not going to know that unless somebody reports them. And, Nevada is a great state to be able to look at that has implemented such great self-reporting pieces where, and they're completely protected. And I think that that's what we will work with, need to look at for all of our veterinary boards. And I realized that one of the comments that came in said that veterinary boards don't enforce title protection. But I think the key point is if there is, if a veterinary nurse is not defined in the Practice Act, of course the boards can't enforce anything. But the states where it is clearly defined as to who that is and what's required to hold that credential, there can be a lot of self-reporting implemented in those states.
I would add too, in every single profession, healthcare and otherwise, in all 50 states, the board that oversees that profession, in our case, Board of Veterinary Medicine, is the only board that has authority to take steps when somebody puts a sign out their door and says, lawyer, dentist, RVT, and it's up to that board's view of their job, their staff resources. Katie's in Texas. Texas is more active than a small state that simply doesn't have anybody available to do that. So, but let me continue. I'm going to answer this next question. It came up twice, and it's a technical issue that I think I could help with. We want to know why various vet tech schools, specialty academies, newsletters, publications are using the term, quote, veterinary nurse when that is not legally recognized and not the credential that any vet tech is receiving. Are veterinary technician programs using the nurse in their name, and is this legal? First of all, as to the academic side, any community college, for-profit, nonprofit school of any sort, including four-year programs, the use of a name and a degree is not controlled by the professional accrediting body. It's controlled by 6 separate regional accrediting bodies overseen by the U.S. Department of Education that accredit any and all programs in that university, from a mega university like Texas A&M to a small community college in northern Alaska. They're all within one of 6 regional bodies, and they decide what name you can use. And it's not up to a professional accrediting body to decide that. Excuse me, I'm trying to find, okay, good. I want to make that clear. And so therefore, if Purdue grants a degree in veterinary nursing, yes, it is legal, provided Purdue, as I'm sure they did, went through the regional accrediting body that oversees Purdue as a school in the state of Indiana, number one. And the notion of is it legal implies that somebody could come in and say you can't. And I want to repeat for all watching that nursing boards do not have the legal authority to go tell somebody in a different field of human medical care using someone calling themselves a nurse. They don't have authority to go beyond that to tell someone you can't be a nurse. But they could tell if an RVN, if a registered veterinary nurse wandered across the street to a hospital and said, you know what? No reason I can't start helping people here. I've got some time in my lunch to do that because I'm trained to work with needles and with equipment. They could come in right that second and stop that person. And the fact that you said, well, wait a minute, nurse is in my title, that's not going to do you any good, which is why the VNI was careful to say registered veterinary nurse. So the bill, none of the legislation just says nurse. It says registered veterinary nurse, recognizing that that's distinct from the others. Now, the next question, how are titles going to be protected and will the protection be enforced? That's been asked. I'm going to just keep moving. Next, this would be for Heather. Has the title of registered veterinary nurse been definitively decided upon by the VNI, or is this a working title? In other words, is there any potential it may be changed at some point during the process?
Thank you, Mark. That is a piece that Ken and I did tons of research on before we even came up with the title registered veterinary nurse. We looked at licensed veterinary nurse, certified veterinary nurse, looked at the acronyms associated with CVN, LVN, RVN, trademarks, anything that would prevent us from being able to utilize the title. The only available one during our research came down to RVN, registered veterinary nurse.
Okay. Next question is, why has it taken so long for Nafta and the VNI to provide details to budgets and finances? Heather, you're handling that, please.
It hasn't taken so long. It's just a matter of being able to put the data together and put it in the right hands. We have the data, and as we said, we will be releasing it for Catherine to add to this webinar series.
Next question, which I think they meant difference. It says, please explain the importance between sponsorships and donations. Maybe add what's the difference between those two terms, sponsorship and donations.
Two differences. Well, one big difference is the tax implications. With our sponsorships, they cannot be tax deductible. Donations are usually implied as being tax deductible, so it's a difference in terms for taxation purposes.
Okay, this question, the second sentence is a little bit confusing, and Katie, maybe you can help because you're the soothsayer that figures out what they're really asking, but I'll read it. Veterinarians in multiple states will be battling title protection for financial purposes. Not exactly a question. For example, recent bill in Virginia trying to slacken practice acts to allow more off-the-street staff to perform credentialed vet tech duties. Catherine, I'll just throw it out. If people see a question there, if it's a debate, let's move on. But if there's a question there, it's not really aimed at VNI or critics. It's just opinions about veterinarians apparently pulling in, I assume, vet assistants, non-credentialed staff. In Virginia, they're attempting to legislate something there.
So I think this goes back, and Katie, correct me if I'm wrong, I think everything goes back to title protection. There's such a concern, and repeatedly is coming through, and all the questions are about title protection. And in this particular their case, that it's really prevalent in Virginia. So I don't know if necessarily this is a question per se, as a comment, but Katie, why don't you jump in?
Well, it's not simply a matter of title protection in Virginia. They're actually trying to amend the approved task lists for credentialed veterinary technicians and veterinary assistants to move more of the task over to the veterinary assistants that are not credentialed. And I think the point of that statement is that the veterinarians in practice are better able to pay less to a non-credentialed individual, but still allow them the same opportunity to function more like a credentialed technician. Yeah, that reared its ugly head, I want to say about 8 months ago. And I'm not sure what their status is right now.
And I would add, with respect to Virginia, and there's other states in this situation, the shortage of credentialed vet techs has caused veterinarians to say, I can't find a credentialed vet tech to hire. Therefore, if I can't use a vet assistant to do, and one of the ones most often debated is to withdraw blood. If in some states you can, some you can't, they're going to have to themselves as a veterinarian do a whole host of things, which obviously limits the number of pets they can see. And so I think that's the debate in Virginia. We'll move on. That was a great clarification though, Katie, thanks. The next question was asked. Next question, can you release the questions on your website and email them to all members? That would be a question, I guess, to you, Ken, as to whether NAFTA would.
This is the study. So that's when we were talking about that, referring specifically to the study.
Okay, now, next question for.
No, but it is posted on the website, correct?
I'm sorry, which study is this?
The demographic study, that's the link we gave out yesterday. That's on the website, right?
The demographic survey is on the website as a PDF. That's been published on the Nafta journal.
It's the secondary study that we did after the demographic study that showed our 60% support, 20% neutral.
Yeah, so
that link that we put in all of our presentations.
So that's on the website.
That's on the website as well, yeah.
But both of them are on the website.
Yes.
Okay.
So there's two back-to-back questions that either Heather, Ken, or Ed, of course, could answer. So, number one, have you asked for position statements from state associations? I'm assuming they're referring to state vet tech associations. Have you asked for position statements?
Yeah, if we're talking about a flat out, I'm sorry, was that Ed?
Go ahead, Ken.
Sorry about that. If we're talking about across the board request for position statements from the state associations, no, we haven't done that because we want to take the conversation to the states as people are comfortable having them and on their terms. So we're not strong-handing anyone into trying to get position statements. The states that we've approached are states that we felt were the ones that we wanted to move into first, and we've had conversations. And so, but there are a lot of states that are reaching out to us regarding how they could move the initiative forward in their state, and so that's the way that we've been approaching it. but we did get consensus from the stakeholders through the leadership summits that we've been holding.
Next question, have you reached out to state association, again, Vet Tech Association boards? Same answer, I assume?
I think we need to clarify that state association and boards are really two different things in our states, if I'm interpreting that question correctly. So if that question is, are we reaching out to associations? Ken answered that. Are we reaching out to state boards? And I think that answer is if a state board is in, I guess I should say, if we're going to work with the state, of course, we will answer any questions that those state boards have, but we are not going directly to those boards when we're starting those conversations. We need to have the conversations and ensure that the Veterinary Technician Association and the Veterinary Medical Association are on board before moving forward.
Yeah,
I'll also add that we were at the AABSB annual meeting when this was starting up and having conversations with state board members that were present. We were in communication with the AABSB as well to continue that channel of communication. So any kind of information that we need to send to them, it'll go through the AABSB.
Since we're on the topic, I'm going to interject with one of the comments. And one of the comments indicated that we may not have provided accurate information with regards that New York has come out with a statement. So is that correct? So I just want to make sure that are we aware of New York's position?
New York State Vet Tech Association.
That is what they indicated.
Yeah.
The New York State Vet Tech Association, initially when we started talking about the Vet Nurse Initiative and announced the launch, sent a notice to their membership to say, it was something to the degree of, we don't think this is going to be the best use of our resources at the moment, and hang in with us. We're going to keep you abreast of the situation, and I think that definitely can be taken as we're not supporting this at the moment to something to that degree. But I don't know if there's Heather, do you remember an actual position statement saying that we oppose?
I don't recall having an actual position statement opposing it.
Katie, do you know anything about that?
I don't know that there has been a definitive statement sent to VNI. I can chase that down. Or you're in New York now.
I am, but it's only been for a few months.
That we weren't providing false information, so that was the one clarity point on that. So keep going, Mark.
Okay, now this next question, I'll read verbatim. It's, if resistance to VNI continues to increase, will the VNI be reevaluated and change its course, or will it be bulldozed forward, disregarding legitimate concerns and issues by credentialed vet techs, Nafta members, and state associations? If resistance continues, will the VNI back down, change its course, or go forward? I don't know. It's kind of hard to answer because you're not all the VNI, but does anybody want to take that?
I think that it's a hard question to answer, but when we look at survey results, the overwhelming population of those that respond to the survey support the Veterinary Nurse Initiative, which is why we started this in the first place, because we had the survey results to start that and the support to do that. So I think that, as we talked about, would we replicate another study in the future? And I think that it's important to know those numbers and to understand the voices of our technicians and our nurses that we support.
And I think I can make it more simple and say, yep, absolutely. In that if there are surveys in the future that will show that there's a majority of the people that don't want this to happen, then as a board for NAFTA, we would have to take a look at this and we would have discussions regarding it because we're serving our members. And that's what we're here for. Now, the surveys that have been performed regionally since the VNI started going, they're showing 82.5%, and I think is the ABDT that showed 94% support of the term, and so I'm seeing things moving in the other direction. I know that there's opinions out there that we're very cognizant of and we're listening to, and that's why we had sessions like this. So just keep talking to us.
Next question,
Hey, Mark, if I could just add in really quickly, I do feel like we're seeing and hearing opposition on social media and some on the Bridge Club here. That to me seems to be a vocal, smaller group, to be honest. When I'm out at veterinary conferences and when I've presented the VNI presentation multiple times in my area, I find by and large support for the VNI in actual real life.
Katie, I feel like if you want to add a comment here, jump in.
Part of my question is, when you speak in your poll results of percentages, what's the absolute number of respondents?
Yeah, I have an outline of all of that because I know people ask that question, right? And so the only one that I can think off the top of my head right now is that the ABDT had something like 80% response rate from their membership, and that's the numbers that they got. The total number of people, if we total it up, just summarizing it, is about another 1,000 people that responded. And so that's an additional number of people. And I know that, we want to get more information out there. And I think maybe one of the things that we should mention here is that there is another national scale survey being planned that will get out there so that we can get a better handle on what it looks like now, for sure.
Well, I think that would be reassuring to everybody involved if we see a higher number of respondents, so that it looks like the majority of technicians in the United States have that opportunity, have that awareness. So it's just basically reach out, promote. And I try on my level to say, hey, educate yourself. When they send a survey, respond to it, so that we do have as many technicians providing input, and they need to educate themselves.
Let me keep going. We've got a few more here.
Hang on, Mark. Ken wanted to say something.
Just a quick question is, so what level of participation and what kind of numbers would be satisfactory, I guess, to calm some of the people who feel like they didn't get representation?
Okay, Ken, there are some people you're never going to calm. You and I have had this discussion before. Okay. I think, going back to the Bureau of Labor and their estimate or their job reporting, 103,000 veterinary technician positions in the United States, even if only 10% of those are filled or require credentialed veterinary technicians, I think if we could at least come close to getting a response, and voting sucks, we know that, of at least get a response of 6,000 to 8,000 for a poll. I think that would be more representative than less than 5,000.
Let me jump, if we can jump in here, I think we could, I do want to note though, that, and Catherine knows this as well, a massive presidential survey of the entire United States would be 1,500 people. That would be deemed a massive survey. Most presidential surveys are 300 to 500, occasionally 1,000. So you can debate honestly all day long about, is 4,000 enough? Is 5,000 enough? The science of surveys will tell you that you gain very, very fractional additional knowledge by stair-stepping up like that. But that's a separate debate. We've had a lot of discussion about it the last 2 days. So let me ask a very direct question. It's the next one, if that's okay, Catherine. Will Nafta and the VNI be willing to change from RVN, or registered veterinary nurse, to RVT, or registered veterinary technician? Heather, do you want to, or Ed, we're making Ken do a lot of work here.
You know, we did a lot of discussion about this prior to coming to the decision of registered veterinary nurse. And the bottom line is that there's absolute recognition for the term veterinary nurse and what consumers understand that we do and what the public understands. I think that we could spend $1 million on education for consumers and still not get to a point of where consumers understand what is required to be a veterinary nurse. You know, when we've done the surveys on the streets with Ken on the street and asking people that have no idea about what the tasks are of a veterinary nurse or veterinary technician, overwhelmingly they want a veterinary nurse to work on their pet. So there is a huge piece that while I appreciate those that adore the term veterinary technician, I don't feel we're going to be able to move the needle on public perception and understanding of what we do and the requirements needed by retaining the title veterinary technician. With that is that we already have such a creep effect, as Katie had pointed out yesterday with the term veterinary technician, that there will always be that creep effect there, regardless of what we define, I think, in Practice Acts. Because telling a non-credentialed veterinary technician that you're now an assistant, not a technician, I don't think is going to work in current society.
Will NAFTA be willing to supply all of the state associations, I believe state vet tech associations, with materials for client and public education, print, video, et cetera? Ken?
If I can answer that, I think that we've had some state associations that have created some really great videos during National Veterinary Technician Week. We have practices that have done such a fabulous job. I think that it's not just a part of NAFTA that has to create all of that. And I think we do take a part of that, don't get me wrong. But I also think that it is a part of us and our responsibility of our profession that we create those in our own practices as well for our clients. And that as state associations, we take the role in creating a lot of those educational pieces as well. So to me, this is not just a NAFTA only initiative. I think it's a industry-wide initiative that everybody needs to take a role in.
What is the current number of NAFTA members? Anybody know that number?
So since our change in staffing, we've been trying to get a better handle on what our membership database looks like. We're in the middle of our
renewal cycle.
Thank you. I don't know why I have trouble with that word, renewal, membership renewal cycle. And we get reports regarding that. But we know that prior to this renewal cycle, it was somewhere in the 7,000 to 8,000 range. And we'll continue to take a look at that and we'll see where it's at.
Catherine, I don't see any more questions.
Because we need to go back to the second page, the last page. You still had questions left on your last page that were directed about the practice model. We didn't do any of those questions.
Oh, back in the original. Yeah.
Yes, so we're done with these. So let's go to the back to the original. So we're not done yet, people. We're powering through. We're powering through.
I'm not trying to.
Not a problem. But I'm going to step away for just a minute.
Okay.
Give me a second here.
So this was because we had gone through. This was second demographic study.
Yeah,
all on all the.
I'll find it. I know just what you want. Just 2 seconds here.
No problem. No problem.
Aha.
I just really appreciate everybody's time doing this. I think it's going to be quite helpful.
Trained by Allie. It took me 4.4 seconds to locate this, just like that. I've got it.
Way to go, Allie. Way to go.
So the practice model questions, the Model Practice Act questions, Catherine, some of those were answered. One was, can we see a copy of the standard? I think Ed asked to answer that. Does the Practice Act include title protection, restricted job tasks, or will it expand the role of the technician, especially when there is a veterinary shortage? Okay, let me ask that. Will the Model Practice Act include or expand the role of the technician, especially when there's a veterinary shortage, and does it cover restricted, or does it restrict job tasks? Anyone? Ed, you look very wise and knowledgeable and as a philosopher from Boston area. So do you want to step in?
Well, actually, I think Ken's probably a little bit better to answer this than I might be. My answer would be that, again, AVMA and AAVSB have model practice acts or model language really to be used in the rules and regulations, not as much actually in the practice act about what the role of veterinary technician is. I think that is what we're looking at currently as we're continuing to work with them to define it further. Will it include other things because of a veterinary shortage? To my knowledge, that isn't part of our goals here. I don't know what else to say.
Ken?
So in the initial introduction of these bills, it really doesn't change the job tasks, right? Because we're not doing anything with the Practice Act itself. And so there are people who are wanting to see the scope of like job tasks of technicians being expanded. There are people who want it to be reduced so that more assistants could do more, and there's different kinds of interests that come into play. That's why I said the scope of practice part is the most complicated of the issues that are on this, and so that's why we're having this consensus process of going through national level organizations to try to tailor that the best that we can. So it's hard to say exactly how that would look right at this moment, but we'll keep you appraised of it. We'll get input and we'll work together on it.
Katie, did you want to comment or?
Nope, I'm good with that. Yeah.
Then
right? Is that the last one?
I really, I think everything else, honestly, we've covered, which is title protection efforts and how to enforce and the like. So do you have anything else, Catherine? This has been
I don't, but what I would say to all of our viewers is if you do have questions, please submit them to nurse.org. This is veterinarynurse.org, sorry, as an opportunity to get your questions answered. And I will be sending out the video to all those that attended and with some additional resources. So I would love to have, Katie, if you could send me Charlotte's brochure, I'd love to include that for other people to see. Do you think she would be willing to let me share that?
She has already emailed me her PDF.
Perfect.
And so I haven't checked my email since then, but yes, I'm sure she'll be more than happy to.
That'd be fantastic. That'd be fantastic. So as you guys get more questions, and I will say out to the community too, that if you would like to see this topic brought forward more often and you'd like us to be able to continue to address it, please let Brenda or myself know, because the Bridge Club is for the profession. We feel that we are going to learn and engage better if we would just see each other face to face. And we're all about bridging the conversation. So I want to thank all of you. This has been an incredible 2 days. I want to thank absolutely every single one of you for being a part of this. And, hopefully we've stimulated more questions, and hopefully we've been able to get people to start thinking a little bit. And that's all we care about is, understand what's going on and pick a side, if you will.